She was sleeping through every combat drill. While the rest of her squad fired rounds, climbed walls, and cleared rooms, Staff Sergeant Elena Ward would simply sit down, close her eyes, and drift off like none of it mattered. Her squad hated her for it. Instructors marked her for dismissal. Everyone assumed she was broken or worse, a fraud. But then a SEAL commander showed up. He didn't review her scores. He didn't ask questions. He just shouted a single order across the range. And in that instant, the soldier they thought was a liability became the one person no one would ever underestimate again. Now let's get into it. Staff Sergeant Elena Ward stepped off the transport van at 5:30 in the morning. Boots hitting cracked asphalt, the advanced combat training facility stretched before her rows of plywood shoot houses, shipping containers welded into mock buildings, and obstacle courses that had chewed up better soldiers than the ones shuffling around her now. Mid-30s, unremarkable in every way the Army had taught her to be: plain, desert camouflage, brown hair scraped back in a bun, tight enough to give you a headache just looking at it. What caught your attention if you bothered to look were her eyes, dark, constantly moving, cataloging exits and blind spots, like someone had rewired her brain to see threats instead of scenery. Staff Sergeant Ward reporting for advanced urban combat training, she said. The admin clerk barely glanced up from his clipboard. Barracks C, bunk 15. Chow's at 6:30. First formation at 800. Don't be late. These instructors eat stragglers for breakfast. Elena took her key card and walked toward the barracks duffel bag slung over one shoulder. She moved with the deliberate calm of someone who'd learned that rushing got you killed in the wrong neighborhoods. Behind her, other new arrivals shuffled and complained about the heat. She just walked. Elena claimed the bed in the back corner, clear sight lines to the main door back to the wall, close enough to the emergency exit that she could be through it in 3 steps if things went sideways. Old habits from places where sleeping in the wrong spot could get you killed. At evening chow, she sat alone near the windows, not antisocial, just separate. Her tray was organized with the precision of someone who'd eaten meals while watching for snipers. Everything in its place, fork positioned for quick access, eyes constantly scanning the room without seeming to move. 3 tables over, Lieutenant Bryce held court with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having been truly tested. Perfect uniform, perfect posture, perfect teeth. The 3 soldiers nodding along to his every word were cut from similar cloth. Mendes built like he bench-pressed Humvees for fun. Larson sharp-eyed with a mouth that never quite closed all the way. Owen nervous energy wrapped in regulation camouflage. Elena walked past their table carrying her empty tray. The conversation died just long enough for her to feel the weight of their stares, then picked up again with the kind of laughter that had edges. She dumped her tray, wiped it clean, and walked out. But she filed their faces away in the part of her brain that kept track of potential problems, the same way you memorize terrain before moving through it in the dark. The rifle qualification range stretched out under a sky the color of old brass, target silhouettes, wavering in heat shimmer at 200 meters. Should have been easy shooting for anyone with Elena's record, which according to her personnel file included multiple combat deployments and marksman ratings that put her in the top 5% of the Army. Elena stepped up to the firing line, checked her weapon, and locked in a magazine. The range commands echoed down the line in the familiar cadence that every soldier knew by heart. Shooters, you have 30 rounds, 10 targets, 3 minutes. Make ready on the firing line. Rifles came up in unison. Bolts slapped home. Safety selectors clicked to fire. Commence firing. The line erupted in controlled chaos, 30 soldiers putting rounds down range as fast as accuracy allowed, except at Elena's lane. She raised her rifle, smoothly sight, picture-perfect breathing controlled. For a heartbeat, it looked like she was about to engage. And then she lowered the weapon. Her finger never approached the trigger. She stood there staring down range with the expression of someone listening to music only she could hear. When the ceasefire whistle blew 30 seconds later, her target was untouched, pristine, not a single hole in paper that looked like it had been hanging there since the Clinton administration. The range instructor walked over, jaw tight enough to crack teeth. "Ward, you planning on shooting today, or are you just here for the scenery?" "Shooting, Sergeant," she replied, calm, matter of fact. "Then put rounds on target. That's what we're here for." "Yes, Sergeant." Second string, same result, rifle up, perfect form weapon, lowered without firing. The instructor's pen carved angry marks across his clipboard, while 30 other soldiers chewed through ammunition. By the time the range went cold, whispers were already spreading down the line like smoke. Elena walked off with the same unhurried stride she'd used walking on, ignoring the stairs that followed her to the equipment shed. Behind her, Bryce's voice carried just far enough. Guess some people's qualification records don't transfer. Wonder what else doesn't transfer. The obstacle course was where strong soldiers went to discover they weren't as strong as they thought. Elena's squad lined up at the starting line, sweat already darkening their uniforms, despite the early morning hour. The instructor briefed them with the enthusiasm of a man who'd watched thousands of soldiers learn exactly how much the human body could hate them. 15 obstacles, 30-minute time limit. Fall behind the pack, and you'll be running it again this afternoon in full battle rattle. Questions. No one was stupid enough to ask questions. The whistle blew. Soldiers scattered toward the first obstacle like someone had kicked an anthill. Elena started at the same steady pace she used for everything else. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. She reached the 8-foot wall, third in line, waited her turn, then approached at that same measured pace. Mendes hauled himself over with a grunt and a curse, landing hard in the sand on the other side. Larson followed with the fluid motion of someone who'd been doing this since he was 12. Elena walked up to the wall, looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, then sat down cross-legged in the sand at its base. She closed her eyes. "Ward!" Mendes shouted from the other side. "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't answer, didn't move, just sat there breathing steadily while her squad mates stared in disbelief. "Move your ass," Larson barked. "We've got a time limit." The stopwatch kept ticking. Other squads flowed around them, soldiers grunting and cursing their way over the obstacle. Elena sat motionless, hands resting lightly on her knees, looking for all the world like she was meditating in the middle of a Zen garden instead of a combat training course. When her squad came around the far bend 15 minutes later, uniforms soaked with sweat and sand, she stood up, dusted off her pants, and jogged over to rejoin them. She slotted back into formation without a word, as if sitting in the dirt for a quarter hour was the most natural thing in the world. Bryce ripped his helmet off, face red with exertion and fury. "Outstanding. Just outstanding. Hope the enemy waits while you take a nap." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the group. Elena kept walking, eyes forward, expression unchanged. "Maybe she's saving her energy for something important," Owen offered weakly, though he didn't sound like he believed it himself. "Yeah," Mendes said, spitting sand. "Like the ride home." Urban combat simulation was where training got real. 2-story plywood buildings arranged like a neighborhood, complete with narrow alleys, stairwells, and more corners than you could clear in a lifetime. It was as close to actual combat as you could get without people trying to kill you for real. Elena's squad assembled outside Building Alpha, weapons loaded with simunition rounds that hurt like hell but wouldn't put you in the hospital. The instructor briefed them with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd run this scenario 1,000 times. Hostage rescue, unknown number of hostiles, civilian role players mixed in. Watch your targets, watch your fire, and finish it in 15 minutes. The clock starts when that door opens. Bryce checked his weapon one final time, adrenaline already sharpening his movements. "Mendes, you've got the ram. Owen, stay tight on my 6. Larson, watch the rear. Ward..." He paused, looking at her like she was a piece of equipment he wasn't sure worked. "Try to keep up." Elena nodded once. No argument, no objection, just acknowledgement. The ram hit the door with a crack that echoed off plywood walls. Splinters flew, hinges screamed, and Bryce rushed through the breach with his rifle at the ready. "Move, move, move!" Mendes followed, then Owen, then Larson, boots pounding on plywood floors as they flowed into the building. Elena entered, last weapon ready, eyes tracking corners and shadows. And then she peeled off into a corner of the first room, sat down against the wall, and closed her eyes. The simulation unfolded with predictable efficiency. In 30 seconds, 3/4 of the squad was combat ineffective, and Elena Ward sat in her corner, eyes closed, breathing steadily like she was taking a power nap, while her teammates bled synthetic blood on the plywood floor. The exercise alarm wailed. Red lights flashed. Game over. Bryce ripped his helmet off, face mottled with fury and humiliation. He stormed across the room to where Elena sat, finger jabbing the air between them. "You didn't fire a single round. You just sat there while we got slaughtered. What the hell is wrong with you?" Elena opened her eyes and stood brushing sawdust from her uniform. "Rear security was maintained," she said calmly. "Maintained?" Bryce's voice cracked into a laugh without humor. "We're all dead, Sergeant. Every single one of us." "What world is that rear security?" The instructor stepped between them before things escalated further, but his expression was no less grim than Bryce's. "Ward, if this continues, you'll be gone before the week is out. This is your official warning. Show improvement or you're done." "Yes, Sergeant," she replied, no defensiveness, no argument, just the same unruffled calm she'd shown since day one. But something was different in her eyes, and not defiance, not anger, just a flicker of something that hadn't been there before, like someone had switched on a light in a room that had been dark for a very long time. By evening, chow, the nicknames had solidified like concrete. Sleepwalker followed Elena through the chow line, whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Nap time got tossed around whenever she appeared in formation. The 4 soldiers who tried to carry her through training had made it their personal mission to remind everyone, especially her, that she didn't belong. "Hey, Sleepwalker," Bryce called out as she passed their table with her tray. "Planning another nap tomorrow, or are you going to try staying awake this time?" Elena walked to the far end of the dining hall, sat alone and ate methodically, same bite size, same pace, same careful attention to her surroundings that she brought to everything else. When she finished, she stood, bust her tray, and walked out without a glance at the table behind her. But the Master Chief was watching, had been watching since the first day, and what he saw didn't match what everyone else was seeing. Most people looked at Elena Ward and saw someone who didn't care, someone who'd given up, someone who probably shouldn't be carrying a weapon. The Master Chief saw someone whose gear was arranged with a precision that spoke of years spent where disorganization meant death. Someone who moved through the base like she'd memorized every corner, every exit, every potential threat vector. Someone whose hands, when she thought no one was looking, ran through weapons manipulations with a fluidity that contradicted every fumbled drill on the training ground. These weren't the habits of someone who'd quit. They were the reflexes of someone who'd learned to survive in very dangerous places. The question was whether Elena Ward was broken or just switched off. The breaking point came during the final evaluation exercise, a full-scale urban assault simulation, multiple buildings, role players armed with everything from pistols to belt-fed machine guns, the kind of scenario that separated the real operators from the wannabes. Elena's squad lined up at the start point, weapons loaded, faces grim with the weight of everything riding on the next 30 minutes. One more failure and she was gone. Everyone knew it, including her. The instructor laid out the scenario with military brevity, building to building clearance, unknown hostiles, civilian role players scattered throughout. Points for speed, accuracy, and casualty prevention. Failures will be noted and acted upon. His eyes found Elena in the formation, no words necessary. This was her last chance. Bryce adjusted his helmet jaw set with determination. "All right, people, let's do this right. Mendes, you've got point. Owen, watch the corners. Larson, cover R6. Ward." He paused, looking at her with something between pity and disgust. "Try not to fall asleep." The whistle blew. Mendez charged the first door ram, swinging like a sledgehammer. Wood exploded, hinges screamed, and the squad poured into the breach. Elena entered last as always, weapon ready, but already drifting toward the shadows. She found a corner in the first room, lowered herself against the wall, and closed her eyes, same as always, same as every exercise for 2 weeks straight. The squad flowed deeper into the building, leaving her behind like furniture they'd forgotten to move. Within minutes, the familiar sounds echoed through the plywood walls, shouts, simulated gunfire alarms marking casualties. From outside the training area, Master Chief Rodriguez watched through the observation windows with growing concern. 2 weeks of this pattern, and he was starting to wonder if Elena Ward was beyond salvaging. And then everything changed. The black SUV appeared without warning, engine purring through the main gate like it belonged there. Government plates, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that made people stop what they were doing and pay attention. Commander Jake Rohr stepped out of the passenger side, and the entire training yard went quiet. Late 40s weathered in the way that spoke of years spent in hard places doing difficult things. His uniform was crisp but functional. No ribbons for show, just the essentials. But it was the way he moved that caught everyone's attention, deliberate, economical, like someone who'd learned that wasted motion could get you killed. He walked straight to where the Master Chief stood watching the exercise boots crunching on gravel. "Chief Rodriguez?" Roar said, voice carrying without effort. "I'm Commander Roar. I understand you have Staff Sergeant Elena Ward in this rotation." Rodriguez straightened slightly. "Yes, sir. She's in the middle of an evaluation right now." "I know." Roar's eyes found the building where Elena's squad was still fighting their way through the role players. "I'd like to observe." "Sir, she's scheduled for dismissal. Her performance has been—" "I've read the reports," Roar cut him off gently but firmly. "I'm not here to challenge your assessment, Chief. I just want to see her run one more scenario." Rodriguez studied the commander's face, looking for clues about what this was really about. "What kind of scenario are we talking about, sir?" Roar's mouth ticked into what might have been a smile. "The kind where she gets permission to wake up." Inside Building Alpha, the simulation was falling apart with predictable efficiency. Bryce had taken a paint round to the helmet and was marked as a casualty. Owen was down with a chest wound. Mendes was fighting hard but losing ground to role players who knew every angle in the building. And Elena Ward sat in her corner, eyes closed, breathing steadily, oblivious to the chaos surrounding her. That's when Roar's voice cut across the training yard like a blade through silk. "Ward!" The single word carried through the plywood walls, through the noise of simulated combat, through 2 weeks of conditioning that had kept Elena locked in sleep mode. She opened her eyes. "Ward, recall, mode execute." The transformation was immediate and absolute. Elena rose in one fluid motion, rifle snapping to her shoulder muscle memory, taking over like someone had thrown a switch. The lethargy was gone, replaced by something fierce and focused and utterly professional. She flowed out of the corner like water finding its level weapon, tracking to angles that hadn't even developed yet. When the first role player appeared in a doorway, she was already engaging controlled pair center mass target down before he could bring his weapon to bear. Bryce, still sprawled on the floor with his fatal head wound, could only stare as Elena moved past him with surgical precision. This wasn't the same person who'd been sleeping through exercises for 2 weeks. This was someone else entirely. She cleared the first floor in 90 seconds, transitioning from room to room with the kind of tactical movement that gets taught at very expensive schools to very dangerous people. Every angle anticipated, every threat neutralized before it could develop every movement designed to conserve energy and maximize efficiency. Upstairs, the role players were waiting with the kind of complex ambush that usually shredded even experienced squads. Elena flowed into it like she designed the scenario herself. 2 contacts from flanking positions, she dropped both with precise shots before they could coordinate fire. A third from a concealed position that should have been impossible to spot, she put him down while transitioning between the other 2. In the observation area, instructors stopped taking notes to watch. Stopwatches hung forgotten in suddenly slack hands. This wasn't just good shooting or tactics. This was artistry. When Elena reached the final room, the hostage scenario that had been stumping squads all month, she didn't pause at the threshold to assess the situation. She read the geometry in a glance, calculated angles and backdrop, and moved. The role players holding the civilian hostage never had a chance. 2 shots, both targets down, hostage secured before anyone else in the building had even processed what was happening. The exercise alarm sounded, but this time it was the long, clean tone that meant mission accomplished. Elena safed her weapon, helped the hostage to his feet, and signaled all clear to the observation post. Her breathing was steady, controlled. Whatever had just awakened in her was already tucking itself back behind a professional mask. In the staging area, her squad mates stared in stunned silence. Bryce pulled his helmet off, paint still dripping from the impact site on his forehead, eyes wide with something that looked more like fear than respect. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, voice cracking. Who are you?" Elena checked her weapon, made sure it was safe, and looked at him for the first time in 2 weeks. "Really?" She looked at him. "Same person I've always been," she said quietly. "You just never had clearance to see it." The debrief room was small and windowless, smelling faintly of gun oil, and the kind of disinfectant they used in places where people discussed things that never made it into official reports. Elena sat on one side of a folding table weapon disassembled for cleaning. Across from her, Commander Rohr and Master Chief Rodriguez tried to make sense of what they just witnessed. "Recall protocol," Rohr said without preamble. "Classified program need-to-know basis, small teams, deep insertion, high-value targets in denied areas." Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And Sergeant Ward was part of this. She was the best part of it. Rohr's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. 18 months operating in places that don't officially exist, doing things that never officially happened. Perfect mission record, 0 friendly casualties, 100% extraction rate. Rodriguez looked at Elena, who was running a cleaning patch through her barrel with the same methodical precision she applied to everything. "So what happened? Why the transfer to regular training?" Elena's hands paused for just a moment. "Medical rotation. Took some shrapnel on the last mission, spent 6 months in recovery, while the brass decided if I was still fit for the program." "Authorization," Rodriguez repeated slowly. "Like what you said on the course?" "Exactly. Without the proper activation phrase, recall operatives function like any other soldier." With it, he gestured toward the window where Elena's course record was already being analyzed by instructors who couldn't quite believe what they'd seen. They become what they were trained to be. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "So for 2 weeks, she was essentially what playing dumb." "Not playing," Elena said quietly. "Contained. The conditioning isn't something you can turn off like a light switch. It's more like keeping a guard dog on a leash. It's still a guard dog, but it won't bite until someone gives it permission." Rohr nodded. Command wanted to see if she could integrate into conventional units after her injury. They thought maybe the conditioning had been compromised, that she'd lost the ability to operate at that level. And had she? "You saw what happened out there, Chief. Does that look compromised to you?" Rodriguez rubbed his face, processing the implications. "And now she gets reassigned where her skills can be properly utilized," Rohr said. "Rohr. Advanced Training Command Special Operations Cadre, not as a student, as an instructor." Elena finished reassembling her rifle, each piece clicking into place with practiced precision. "Wherever you need me," she said, "but not as a showpiece." "No showpieces," Rohr agreed. "Just a professional doing professional work for people who understand what that means." The paperwork was processed within hours, dismissal recommendation deleted, replaced with a transfer order that would take Elena Ward somewhere her particular set of skills would be appreciated rather than misunderstood. But the story didn't end with paperwork. That evening in the barracks, the atmosphere was different, not hostile anymore, but not comfortable either, the kind of tension that comes when people realize they've been sharing space with someone far more dangerous than they'd imagined. Bryce approached her bunk as she was packing helmet in his hands like a peace offering he wasn't sure how to present. "Ward, look, we didn't know about what you could do." Elena glanced up from her duffel bag. "You weren't supposed to, but why didn't you just show them earlier? Save yourself all the grief." Her answer was simple and devastating. "Because I wasn't authorized to." Mendez and Larson kept their distance, speaking to her only when military courtesy demanded it. But Rodriguez noticed they'd started studying combat footage differently, trying to understand how someone could move through space with such absolute confidence. Owen tried to apologize one evening, catching her outside the mess hall. "I shouldn't have called you dead weight. I didn't understand." "Most people don't," Elena said. "That's kind of the point." Commander Rohr left the next morning, black SUV disappearing through the gate like it had never been there. No ceremony, no speeches, just the quiet professionalism of people who understood that some stories were meant to stay classified. But before he departed, he pulled Rodriguez aside for a final conversation. "She'll probably request assignment to training command," he said. "Teaching instead of doing. Don't try to talk her out of it." "Why not if she's as good as you say?" "Because people like her have already given enough. They've spent years in places most of us can't imagine, doing things most of us couldn't handle. At some point, they earn the right to pass on what they know instead of using it." Rodriguez watched the SUV disappear into the morning heat, carrying with it the only person who really understood what Elena Ward had been through, what she'd sacrificed, what she'd become. The rest of the training cycle continued without incident. Elena completed her remaining evaluations with quiet competence, not the explosive demonstration she'd given during the recall activation, but solid professional performance that reminded everyone she belonged exactly where she was. On graduation day, she stood in formation with the rest of her class, no different from any other soldier receiving orders and moving on to the next assignment. But those who'd been there, who'd seen what happened when someone gave her permission to be dangerous, carried that knowledge with them. Some secrets were too important to forget, even when they were too classified to share. And in the quiet moments afterward, when the official reports were filed and the classified details locked away, one question remained. How many other sleepwalkers were out there moving through the world with capabilities that only a few people knew existed? How many quiet professionals waiting patiently for someone with the right clearance to remind them what they were really for? The answer, like Elena Ward herself, remained classified.